My name is Lucille Grant, and a year after my husband passed away, I returned to the old workshop he built with his bare hands. For 12 months I avoided that place as if it were cursed. Every board, every nail, every smell of sawdust reminded me of the life we had and the one that ended too soon. But grief has a strange way of calling you back to the places you fear the most. The day I went back, the air was cold and gray. The Ohio wind cut through my coat as I parked by the old fence. The sign above the door still read Grant Sons Woodworks, though one of the letters had fallen off. The last time I stood here was the day they brought Harold's body out. I thought I would never cross that threshold again. Yet there I was, holding the same rusty key he once carried on his belt. People say time heals. Maybe it does. But what time doesn't heal, silence usually buries. And I was tired of silence. My grandson Eric told me to sell the place months ago. He said it was too painful to keep, that I should move somewhere warm and quiet. He's 24, young and impatient, always chasing something new. Somewhere along the way, that boy disappeared. I unlocked the door. The hinges groaned, just like they used to. The smell hit me first: oil, dust, and old pine. Light filtered through the broken window panes, revealing workbenches covered in forgotten tools. Harold's jacket still hung by the doorway, stiff with time. I ran my hand over it and whispered, "I'm home." For a moment the air felt alive. There was a faint hum like the echo of machinery deep in the room. My chest tightened. That couldn't be right, the power had been cut for months. But as I stepped further inside, the hum grew louder. It wasn't memory. It wasn't my imagination. Something was running. I followed the sound toward the back room. My hand trembled as I reached for the switch. The lights flickered, and there it was, the circular saw, spinning slowly, steady as a heartbeat. Fresh sawdust covered the floor. Someone had been here, recently. I froze, half afraid, half certain I was losing my mind. The world around me blurred as one thought pierced through the noise. I was not alone in my husband's workshop. The sound of the machine filled the room, low and rhythmic, like a secret heartbeat. I stepped closer, each footfall echoing against the wooden floor. The saw was spinning, but no one was there. A faint trail of fresh sawdust led toward the far corner of the shop, to Harold's old desk. That desk used to be his sanctuary. He would sit there every night after dinner, sketching new designs or fixing broken toys for the kids down the street. Now, a coffee mug sat on it, half full, still warm. My pulse quickened. I reached out to touch it, and the heat on the porcelain told me what I didn't want to believe. Someone had been here maybe minutes ago. I turned toward the shelves, scanning the space for signs of life. There were new tools I didn't recognize, newer brands, sharper blades. A work apron hung neatly by the window, embroidered with a name I couldn't quite make out. My eyes narrowed, tracing the threads until I saw it clearly: E. Collins. I didn't know any Collins. For a brief moment, I wondered if I had walked into the wrong place. Maybe I had mistaken another workshop for ours. But no, there on the wall was the photo of Harold and me, taken 30 years ago, right after we opened the shop. His arm around me, his face proud, his smile still alive in the dust-covered glass. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the far wall, the same one Harold had repaired a dozen times. It was running perfectly, though I hadn't wounded in years. Something shifted behind me. A shadow flickered near the back door. I spun around, heart hammering, but the space was empty again. Only the faint scent of pine and machine oil lingered. I called out, my voice trembling, "Hello? Is someone here?" No answer. Only the slow creak of a board settling under its own age. I glanced back at the desk. A folded sheet of paper lay beneath the mug, smudged with fingerprints. I hesitated, then unfolded it. It wasn't a letter, it was a ledger, freshly written, dated last week. The name on top read, Grant Community Workshop. I stared at it in disbelief, my breath caught between fear and something else I couldn't name. My husband's name was everywhere on that page, his handwriting, his logo, his dream, but he'd been gone for a year. And yet somehow his work was still alive. I carried the ledger to Harold's desk and sat down slowly. The surface was covered with dust, but the paper felt new, the ink still glossy beneath the lamplight. Every page listed names, hours worked, and small payments made. These weren't invoices for clients. They were wages. The handwriting wasn't Harold's, but whoever had written them knew this place well. As I turned the pages, I noticed notes in the margins, phrases like teach finishing to Mark, safety check for Sam, new hire Maria. Each entry was signed with the initials HG. My stomach tightened. Harold Grant. My husband's initials. It made no sense. I'd buried him with those same hands that once built every inch of this place. I saw the tools in his coffin. And yet here they were, his marks, his plans, continuing as though he had never stopped. A chill ran down my spine. I rose from the chair and scanned the walls, searching for something, anything that could explain this. There, near the old calendar, a corkboard was pinned with photos, men and women I didn't recognize, smiling with sawdust on their sleeves. Underneath, a small plaque read, Hale County Cooperative, founded by H. Grant. It hit me like a storm. Harold had created something I never knew about: a workshop for the unemployed, a place to teach them carpentry and give them income. But why had he kept it from me? I'd spent 40 years by his side, and yet he carried this secret to his grave. The door creaked suddenly. My heart stopped. I pressed myself against the wall as footsteps echoed inside. There were voices, 2 men, maybe 3. Their words were muffled but urgent. "Told you Eric wants it sold by next month. He said his grandmother's too old to notice." Eric's name sliced through me like a blade. I froze, afraid to breathe. "Once Stokes gets the land, we'll be done here," another voice said. "He's offering a fortune for it." Their footsteps drew closer, boots scraping on the wooden floor. I could see shadows moving across the wall. Without thinking, I slipped up the narrow staircase that led to the loft above. My knees ached, but fear gave me strength. From there I could see them through the gaps in the railing, 2 men in dusty coats, scanning the room, one holding a clipboard. My throat tightened as I realized the truth. My grandson wasn't just planning to sell the workshop. He had already set the plan in motion. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of those men pacing through Harold's workshop burned in my mind. Eric's name echoed in my ears like a wound that refused to close. I waited until morning, then called him. My voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of what I had heard. "Eric, we need to talk. Come by the house this afternoon." He hesitated before answering. "About what, Grandma?" "You'll see." He arrived just after noon, dressed too neatly for an ordinary visit. His cologne hit me before he even stepped through the door, a scent Harold used to call city arrogance. I motioned for him to sit. The air between us was thick with unspoken history. "Did you know anyone's been in the workshop?" I asked. He stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I went there yesterday. The machines were running, there were people working, and I heard your name, Eric. They said you wanted it sold." He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "Grandma, listen. That place is falling apart. It's dangerous. You don't need to be tied to it anymore." "That's not what I asked," I said quietly. He sighed, pulling a folder from his bag. "I've already found a buyer. His name's Richard Stokes. He's offering good money. Enough to take care of you, pay off the taxes, and maybe even set you up somewhere nice. You deserve that." I stared at the folder, then opened it. The contract was thick with legal jargon, but one thing caught my eye, a signature. Harold's. My heart lurched. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. Eric hesitated, then said, "Grandpa signed it years ago. I found it in his files." "No," I said firmly, pointing at the scrawl. "That's not his handwriting. I would know his signature anywhere." He froze, eyes darting to the floor. "Eric," I said softly, "what have you done?" He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "I did what had to be done. You're clinging to ghosts, Grandma. Grandpa's gone. The workshop is just a pile of rotting wood. I'm trying to save what's left of us." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Save us. By selling the only thing he built to give people a future. He turned away, jaw tight. "You don't understand. You never do." The door slammed behind him before I could speak again. The sound echoed through the empty house, leaving me with the bitter truth. My own grandson had chosen greed over legacy. The morning after our argument, the sky broke into a steady drizzle. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder Eric had left behind. The fake signature glared back at me like an accusation. Every line of that document felt like betrayal written in ink. Around 10, a soft knock echoed at the front door. I opened it to find a woman in her 40s, standing on my porch, rain clinging to her dark hair. She held an envelope in one hand and a small leather binder in the other. "Mrs. Grant?" she asked gently. "My name's Maria Torres. I work at the workshop." I stiffened. You're one of them. You've been in my husband's shop. She nodded. Yes, ma'am. But not how you think. Your husband started something good, and we've been trying to keep it alive. I let her in, wary but curious. She laid the binder on the table, opening it to reveal photos men and women sanding wood, repairing furniture, teaching younger workers. Every face looked proud. Every corner of the workshop was alive again. Your husband created the Grant Community Workshop 2 years before he passed, Maria said softly. He used his savings to buy old tools, fix them, and teach people who couldn't find work. He said everyone deserved a second chance. I stared at the photos. Harold, with his kind eyes and quiet laugh, had done all this without ever telling me. My throat tightened as Maria pulled out the envelope. He left this with us, she continued. He said you'd come back when you were ready. I opened the letter. The handwriting was his uneven but unmistakable. Lucy, it began. If you're reading this, it means you finally forgave life enough to walk back inside. The workshop isn't about wood or profit. It's about dignity. About building people the way we used to build things together. Promise me you'll protect it if someone ever tries to take it. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears spilling down my cheeks. Maria hesitated, then added quietly, Eric's been meeting with a man named Richard Stokes. He says the sale's almost final. The room seemed to tilt. The air turned heavy again, full of thunder that hadn't yet broken. Then we'll stop it, I said, voice steady now. I won't let my husband's legacy die in someone else's hands. Maria nodded. You won't be fighting alone. The next day, Maria drove me to the office of Harold's old attorney, Robert Lane. He had represented our family for years, back when Harold was still drawing blueprints on napkins and dreaming bigger than our bank account could handle. The man hadn't changed much: silver hair, thick glasses, a calm that came from decades of cleaning up other people's messes. When I told him about the forged signature and the planned sale, his face darkened. Richard Stokes, he muttered, flipping through his files. That man's been trying to buy up half the county. He's notorious for preying on small property owners. Your grandson may not realize who he's dealing with. He knows, I said bitterly. He just doesn't care. Robert leaned forward. Mrs. Grant, the workshop's property taxes are overdue. Stokes likely found that information and used it to pressure Eric. If those debts aren't cleared within 30 days, the county can repossess the land. How much? I asked. He looked at his notes. $40,000. The number landed like a hammer. 40,000 might as well have been $1 million. My savings barely covered the mortgage and Harold's medical bills. Maria sat quietly beside me, her hands clasped. I'll find a way, I said finally, though I had no idea how. Robert adjusted his glasses. You might not have to. If Harold established the workshop as a cooperative, there could be community rights tied to it. I'll dig deeper, but time is short. That night, back at the workshop, Maria gathered the workers. There were about 20 of them, men and women from all walks of life. A few had tears in their eyes as she explained the situation. Then, one by one, they stepped forward and laid envelopes on the workbench. Crumpled bills, coins, even handwritten IOUs. Mrs. Grant, Maria said softly, we can cover most of the debt if we all pitch in. Your husband gave us jobs when we had nothing. Let us do this. For a long time I couldn't speak. The workshop buzzed with quiet determination, the kind that doesn't need speeches or promises. These people weren't just workers, they were Harold's legacy standing in front of me, ready to fight. Finally I nodded. All right, I said, voice trembling but sure. Then we fight together. And for the first time in a year I felt Harold's presence not as a ghost but as strength in the room. The following week, Richard Stokes made his first move. He filed a complaint with the county, claiming the workshop was unsafe and unfit for operation. It was a cheap tactic. He wanted the building condemned before we could pay the taxes. By Friday, an inspection was scheduled. That morning I stood in front of the workshop with Maria and the others. The sky was pale and cold, the kind of light that makes everything look fragile. Trucks pulled up, carrying 2 inspectors and a man in a gray suit. Stokes didn't bother hiding behind paperwork. He came in person, his smile thin and rehearsed. Mrs. Grant, he said, stepping out, I hear you've been busy. I just hope this old place doesn't fall apart before you finish. I didn't answer. Robert Lane was there beside me, clipboard in hand, ready to document everything. Maria started recording with her phone. The inspectors began walking through the building, tapping walls, checking outlets, measuring stair rails. One of them muttered, "It's old, but sturdy." Stokes's expression soured. He followed close behind, pointing at cracks in the plaster and piles of sawdust like they were signs of decay. "This place is a liability," he snapped. "You could lose everything if one of these machines breaks." I met his eyes. "We already lost everything once. We learned how to build it back." He smirked. "We'll see." Hours passed. Every outlet worked, every safety code met. The workers had cleaned and prepared the shop to perfection. When the inspectors finished, one of them handed me the final report. "Mrs. Grant," he said, "this place is cleaner than most new facilities. You're cleared." Stokes's jaw tightened. He turned to leave, muttering something under his breath. But before he reached his car, Robert called out, "By the way, Richard, using false claims to manipulate property sales is a felony. You might want to read that before you file another complaint." Stokes paused but said nothing. He got into his car and drove off, tires spitting gravel. I stood watching the dust settle, my hands shaking not from fear, but from relief. We had won the first battle, but I knew it wouldn't be the last. A week later, the storm came not from the sky, but from the courthouse steps. Richard Stokes had filed new papers, claiming ownership of the workshop through the purchase debt. The taxes had been paid, but he produced evidence that the payment came too late. It was a lie, but lies with money often travel faster than truth. Robert urged me to stay calm. "We need public eyes on this," he said. "If he's twisting the system, the community should see it." So we called a meeting. Maria spread the word, and by Saturday, half the town gathered outside the workshop. Local reporters arrived, their cameras circling like bees. Stokes showed up, confident as ever, flanked by his lawyers and, to my heartbreak, by Eric. He wouldn't look at me at first. He stood beside Stokes, hands in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. The crowd murmured when they saw him. I felt something in me crack, but I held my ground. Robert began speaking, explaining how Stokes had used manipulation and false documents to seize community land. Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Grant," he said softly, "you have something to say." I stepped forward. The microphone felt cold in my hands. "My husband built this workshop to give people work, not to feed greed. For 40 years, this town trusted the name Grant. My grandson may have forgotten what it stands for, but I haven't." That stirred the crowd. Cameras flashed. Stokes's smirk faltered for the first time. Then Eric spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the wind. "She's right," he said. "I made a mistake." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "Stokes promised to forgive my debt if I helped him sell this place. He said Grandma would never know, but she did, and she's the only one who still believes in what this workshop means." The crowd gasped. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised. Stokes lunged toward Eric, hissing, "You'll regret this, boy." But Robert intercepted, showing the forged documents to the cameras. Within hours, the story spread online. Local hero's grandson exposes land fraud. Stokes tried to leave, but the police were already there, collecting evidence. When the chaos settled, Eric walked up to me. His eyes were wet. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he whispered. I took his hand and said, "We all make mistakes, Eric. The test is what we do after them." And just like that, the war began to end, not with revenge, but with truth. 2 days later, the news broke everywhere: developer under investigation for fraud and coercion. Richard Stokes's empire began collapsing faster than anyone expected. Former property owners came forward with stories just like ours: threats, forged documents, false inspections. His lawyers couldn't plug all the leaks. The state launched a full audit, and overnight, the man who'd walked through my door smirking became a headline no one wanted to be associated with. But victory didn't feel sweet, not yet. Eric and I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where our fight had begun weeks ago. He hadn't slept much. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed. I poured him coffee the way I used to when he was a boy, even though we both knew caffeine couldn't fix what was broken between us. "I should have trusted you," he said quietly. "Instead, I let someone buy my fear." I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "We all sell pieces of ourselves when we're desperate, Eric. The trick is learning how to buy them back." He nodded, tears brimming. "Do you think Grandpa would forgive me?" "Your grandfather built a place where second chances are part of the foundation," I said gently. That was the point all along. Later that afternoon, Maria arrived with the others. They carried food, laughter, and something else, hope. For the first time since Harold's death, the workshop didn't feel like a graveyard. It felt alive again. Robert called during dinner. The judge signed the motion, he said. The workshop is now recognized as a protected cooperative under community trust law. That means no one, not even a relative, can sell or transfer it without full member consent. I sank back in my chair, relief washing through me. So it's safe. As safe as it can ever be, he replied. You did it, Lucille. You and Harold built something that outlived both greed and grief. That night, I walked alone down to the workshop. The machines stood silent, catching the moonlight through the clean glass Harold had once polished by hand. I touched the nearest one, the same type that had taken our son years ago, and whispered, You took so much from us, but tonight you gave something back. I didn't expect an answer, but in that stillness, surrounded by the hum of legacy and forgiveness, I felt one anyway. It was peace, hard-earned but finally real. 3 months later, the workshop looked nothing like the place I'd first stepped into on that cold October night. The walls were repainted, the floors polished, and the old metal smell replaced by something warmer: coffee, fresh sawdust, and the sound of life returning. We held a small ceremony to dedicate it officially as the Grant Memorial Cooperative, a name chosen by the workers themselves. Maria stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. This place was built from loss, she said, but it survives because of love, because one woman chose to open the door instead of walking away. I tried to speak after her, but when I looked out at all their faces, young, old, strangers who'd become family, the words tangled in my throat. So I simply said, Harold would be proud, and that was enough. Eric stood beside me, not as a broken man but as a builder again. He'd started learning the machines from Carlos and Elena, spending long nights repairing what others thought was beyond fixing. He didn't talk much about Stokes anymore, or about the mess he'd helped create. Instead, he showed up every morning before sunrise, coffee in hand, ready to work. Redemption wasn't something he asked for, it was something he earned hour by hour. One afternoon I found him at Harold's old workbench, sanding a piece of walnut with quiet focus. You're just like your grandfather, I said softly. He smiled, trying to be. We were both silent for a moment, the kind of silence that feels full, not empty. That evening, the cooperative hosted an open house. Families came, children ran between the machines, and the air buzzed with laughter. I stood at the entrance, watching the light pour through the wide doors. This wasn't just a workshop anymore, it was proof that even broken things could be remade. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Eric joined me. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked. I shook my head. No, it's home now. Not because of the walls, but because of what they hold. He nodded, and we stood there together, listening to the rhythmic hum of the machine starting up again, steady, strong, alive. That night, I wrote in my journal something Harold used to say, You can't rebuild the past, Lucille, but you can build something better from what's left of it. And that's exactly what we did. If you believe in second chances, in rebuilding what others call lost, don't forget to like, share, and tell me what would you have done if you were in my place?